Okay, ladies and germs, we are at episode 8 of X-Men 97, and I absolutely love today's episode. It is a fantastic entry into the series, and, despite my qualms with X-Men 97, we will talk about them when I get into the series breakdown. Overall, the writing of this show and the tone and the way that it handles at least its most prominent characters has been some of the best writing that I've ever seen for an animated superhero show. And this, I think, was one of the best episodes in the series thus far. So there is so much to break down. Like this, I said it early on when the show came out, I think in episode 3, this is the best thing that Marvel has produced since Infinity War, and I stand by that. It's so great to get some good Marvel content out finally. It feels like it's been so long, and also I want to say, I think it feels even longer because even when we were getting like Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, very, very entertaining, but I don't feel like it was as highbrow as this show, or that Marvel hasn't produced anything this highbrow in a very, very long time. Once again, maybe Infinity War, I would say so, but you've never seen Marvel go to these areas. And what I want to talk about for this episode in particular is it really highlights that. Just this is a very political show. It's going back to, referencing Nazi Germany. And this episode alone made reference to the Nazi scientist who was referred to as the Angel of Light, named Joseph Mengele. I cannot pronounce his name. I am sorry about that. It's a German name, but it made reference to that of the most evil Nazi scientist, and it's making these references to oppressed groups and basic oppressed groups throughout time and the cruelty of the world, and basically using that and building to the point that the series is making. And we see Magneto's concentration camp branding, essentially. And so this episode really builds up throughout it the oppression throughout time. And as we get to Valerie Cooper, who I still contend is Mystique, it seems obvious. They refer to her as human, but she appears to have a connection to Magneto, and she says us, referring to mutants at the end. So I'm pretty sure this character is just Mystique in disguise still, and we will see that. But it builds up to her with a big speech about how all of this stuff that has happened in terms of the genocide on Genosha, that it was kind of expected from them, and that she takes the side that Magneto was right all along. And as we get, if you're clicking on this video, you're going to know you're going to get spoilers, but she frees Magneto, and he creates an EMP throughout the entire world, and it seems like he's finally going to war. So, this episode ties together with Sunspot's story about how his mother would not accept him. Like, she accepted that he was a mutant, but she wanted to hide it still, and basically how he has to come to terms with that. So it's talking about sort of the cycle of oppression that always happens and how to deal with that. And right now we're at the big breakout point with all of that, where Magneto has been trying to play the good guy throughout this season, but now it's like gloves are off. He is back to being his old self. He is going to create a war now, and it's basically just the breaking point of the mutant-human relationships. But I'm getting way, way, way ahead of myself, because this episode mainly deals with Cable coming to Jean and Scott and telling them what Bastion's ultimate plan is, and that he has a future where essentially it's a utopia. He has eradicated mutants apart from the ones used as slaves. It's sort of like the original version of Genosha, except for taken to the extreme throughout the entire world, and that he has manipulated humans, some of them on the side of mutants, some of them against, some of them just regular people, to being transformed into these human sentinels, and that they could be everywhere. So we get the big we get the big drop in this episode where all the Sentinels, and they could be anywhere. We see that Trish Tilby, who's been talking to Beast, is actually a Sentinel. We see that Roberto's butler, who is with him in Jubilee, is actually a Sentinel, and this puts the characters in a lot of peril as they're being chased by these creatures, which is why they needed to be saved by Magneto with the EMP. But with that, we get a lot of good character development on the Summers, and I want to say I just love how Cyclops is being written in this series. This is is probably the best adaptation of Cyclops that I've ever seen. I can't believe earlier this year, as I was getting back into X-Men, I said I thought Cyclops was boring. That's just because I hadn't seen all the best stuff with his character again, and so I rue the day that I ever said that. But this is definitely taking from the best parts of him from the comics. Now that Cable is back and he's able to have something to work on, to come to terms with what happened to his son and to be a father to him, you can see Cyclops coming back a little bit towards his normal self. He even, cracks a smile throughout this episode despite the peril that they're in. And it's just the best adaptation of his character that gets the Boy Scout elements right, that gets the flaws right. And it just makes you always want to see him on the screen. Him and Jean have seemingly completely reconciled after the events of episode 5, and they are definitely a power couple in this season. In this episode especially, we see Jean with Nightcrawler, and I really love the parallel that they make with Nightcrawler talking about how he does not have blood ties with Rogue, but as his adopted sister, they still have chosen to care about each other as siblings, and how that leads into Jean and how she feels that she still mentally feels a great connection with Cable because she has all of Madeline's memories and the memories of carrying him and being a mother, but that she knows he's not actually her child. But there's buildup there into her actually accepting that role despite that fact. So all of that was very, very interesting. I like the theme of family that's also been throughout this season. I like how they tie it in with the Nightcrawler and Rogue stuff. However, I will say, as a complaint for this show entirely, I know this is going to be more specific to me as a massive Rogue fan, I have not been happy overall with, happy at all with her portrayal this season. Like last episode, as you all know, I thought that the Magneto stuff took her way out of character, and then last episode we finally got to see her come back to herself, and I thought we were going in an interesting direction with her. And in this episode, she's just inexplicably in a coma throughout the entire thing and gets nothing. Now, maybe they're building up to something with her absorbing Gyrick. She could have something in her that's going to come out. Maybe. But I honestly felt on my first watch that they were just sidelining her because they have to work on other characters. And just overall, like Cyclops and Jean and Nightcrawler and all of these characters are just given some of the best writing in this series. But this is honestly one of the worst adaptations in terms of writing that I've ever seen of Rogue. And that's really disappointing for me. So it is what it is. I guess Rogue got great representation in X-Men Evolution and all this other stuff, but it is disappointing because this is supposed to be a continuation of 92 cartoon, which was the best adaptation of Rogue ever. I can't really see this as a true continuation of 92 though, because it's just so different in terms of its tone and what it does, but that's a little complaint. I will say, though, we get nothing from Gambit in this episode. Now, I wasn't too upset when he died in episode 5 because as someone who knows comic book media, I'm like, he's going to be back. He's going to be back and back soon, but still nothing. Now, I'm still convinced that he will be back, but the question is when. The showrunner spoke to some people on Twitter today and confirmed that he will not be back in time travel. And someone said, so does that mean that Remy's gone? And he said he will not be back by time travel. So that to me says that Gambit will be back, and the showrunner has been teasing that he'll probably be back in his death form. Fun fact, Gambit in his death form, where he was revived by, well, he wasn't dead in the comics, but made that way by Apocalypse, he kills Bastion. So that might be something. But right now, I mean, we'll see. There were still those teases in the former episodes, like in Xavier's Vision, but right now it's looking like it might be like an end of season reveal that he's back as Death or something like that. It's not looking good for Gambit fans for the rest of season 1. But good news is season 2 might just be around the corner, because they got a 20 episode order, and I would assume that they worked on it together, and I've seen other animated shows where seasons released a month or two apart, so we might not have to wait too long. That's not a complaint with the show. I'm just saying, wow, if they really, really kill off Gambit for this entire season or longer, then I'm gonna be a little mad. But anyway, for other characters, I said that Nightcrawler was very good, and he gets a great scene in this episode with Wolverine. Finally, we get some Wolverine action, and we get them to see them defending Rogue. We get to see Nightcrawler finally use his swordsmanship, and there's a great scene of animation that shows they have to get a Sentinel to another place, and Nightcrawler has to teleport himself, that Sentinel, and Wolverine across the mansion landscape, essentially. And you see the the animation of what it's like to be in Nightcrawler's powers of teleportation, and that part especially stuck out to me. We get to see a Bastion's origin and where he comes from, and basically his goals for the future. And there's also some very scary imagery with the characters who transform into Sentinels. It's all very scary stuff, and the intensity of it is really building to a point where it's just all gonna break out completely. We get to see Sunspot finally use his powers, and by the way, with the Sunspot and Jubilee story, Jubilee gets her 2000s outfit finally. So we're going to a place, because we heard this in a leak, that all the characters are going to get new suits, so we see that gradually happening. But I like to see Sunspot's new powers finally, and I'd like to see him actually do some fighting, which I think we'll get in the next 2 episodes. And last but not least, we have Charles Xavier back in town, and we have Magneto about to go to war. And I have to say, Magneto himself has been given some great writing and understanding in this series, and I think that's probably because he's the favorite of the showrunner. I'm very interested to see how he and Xavier go toe-to-toe, and where we end up at the end of this show, because it seems obvious about where we're going with the Summers family reconciling. We might still see Jean as Phoenix. We might still see her go off as Phoenix, even if she doesn't break up with Scott in that way. But this has just been such an unpredictable show overall. There's so many areas that it could go. They're jumping around so much. I see the theme that it's building, though. But I do want to say, you can kind of see which characters were favored and which characters weren't. Like, Cyclops, Magneto, Jean, they seem to be characters that the showrunners really had an investment in, which is why they're done so well. Rogue, I don't buy that the showrunner really had much of investment in her, and which is why I think she was so badly done. Bishop, I think that he has gotten the short end of the straw in terms of he's barely been in the show at all. Even in this, he wasn't with Cable. I don't even know if he'll show up again. And Storm has barely been in the show as well, though she definitely will appear in the next episode. So, but it's overall very exciting. The action was very exciting, and seeing Cable, Jean, and Cyclops be able to fight together was definitely a highlight of this episode. And they're so well characterized. It's all exciting stuff. But what I really like about this show is the maturity behind it, and how they're weaving together these real world themes in a very entertaining way, and in my mind, even a thought-provoking way, in a sense, because this has given me a lot to think about in terms of, honestly, racism and how the conversation of that has changed over the years. And it's really odd in a good way to see a show be able to tackle this kind of stuff in a way that's mature and makes it thought-provoking, gives you room to think about it, but also isn't afraid to go there, because that's what I feel like a lot of stuff within the political realm has been lately. Like, it's either really blatant and really trying to start an argument, and not really in a thought-provoking way, just a ham-fisted way, or it's too scared to say anything. And so I think that this show has the right balance with that. And so I'm very excited to see where it ends up in these next 2 episodes. I will definitely cover them on the channel. I think what I will do is I will review the next episode, and then I will review the season finale in my series review. I hope you guys will stick around for that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're enjoying X-Men 97 as much as I do. Do you have any gripes with the show, though? Let me know below, and be sure to stay tuned once again for the series review and my Star Wars Day video coming out on May the 4th, Star Wars Day. I'll see you guys then, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you, patrons.